Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on currently and how it actually can help you in your future. So with all of the pandemic issues that have come up, a lot of research has halted. A lot of people haven't been able to get into the labs for quite a bit of time, which may make you anxious and concerned that a lot of your progress towards your future and your future job may be halted because of that, or at least slowed considerably. The truth is, though, you've actually probably still been gaining skills that will help you towards that future. Maybe more soft skills, maybe some of you have been building some hard technical skills. But no matter what, all of the things that you have been encountering over the last couple of months will actually help you. And I want to talk about today a little bit about those skills, as well as some things that you can be doing for the remainder of this summer that will help make you more successful as you go down the road towards your career. And that will also help you feel a little bit more in control of things again too. So today's agenda basically is going to consist of what's been happening. Let's look at the last couple of months and some of the challenges and things that you've been struggling with and dealing with. And let's talk a little bit about the impact that some of those might have had in a good way. So what types of things have you been learning skill-wise? Let's evaluate those and look at how those might impact your future. And then from there, I think it's important to do some background research. So if you've got that hypothesis of here's some of my skills and sort of where I think I'm heading career-wise, you actually really need to back that up by talking with some people and doing some things to ensure that that really is the correct path for you. From there, I'm going to share a few tips of things that you can do to sort of cultivate those ideas and expand on them. Get some more hard evidence, if you will, to be able to demonstrate that this is the right path. And of course, then I have to add a plug that you want to come and connect with us, visit with SCS Career Services, and let us help you as you're making some of those directions too. So thinking about some of the transferable skills that you've probably obtained over the last couple of months, one of the things that you really want to do is not just say, okay, I have these skills, but sort of stew on them just a little bit. Think through those. Evaluate your strength in those skills and then figure out how they can be helpful. So communication is a very, very vital skill for every scientist. It's so important to be able to communicate your science to other people. So that's something that probably you've learned to do, maybe in a new way, with having to do so much more via technology. Teamwork, leadership, your emotional IQ, all of those pieces are also vital in order to be able to be a successful scientist, because so much of what science is a collaborative impact. It's not just a one person's impact changing the world, although that happens sometimes. It's much more of a collaborative team approach. So you've probably learned how to be different types of leaders and different types of team members as you've had to do so, again, so much more through technology, through Zoom and other platforms. You've probably also learned how it's important to be able to read people a little bit more. When you're not being able to just sort of see them day to day and get maybe even annoyed at some of their habits, but you really have to focus because you're using technology to stay connected. Safety, rules. Obviously, that's why we're staying at home in our quarantine situation, is because of learning how important safety is. And even as important and impactful as safety is in the academic environment, it's even more so in industry. So being able to understand the importance and the relevance of rules and adhere to those rules and follow them for the good of the bigger picture, those are important soft skills that sort of you've been forced to do during this COVID time. Problem solving, creativity. Albert Einstein once said that necessity is the mother of invention, and in this situation, that's been very much the case. If you aren't able to get in the lab and get your hands on your experiments, you have to process them and think of different ways, maybe doing more reading. What other types of ideas can you use to tackle some of these same problems? If you think through all of that, that right there is being able to problem solve and demonstrate creativity and innovation. Resilience, of course. All of us hopefully are becoming more resilient as this unknown that we're going through all the time. We're learning how to adapt, and we're learning how to bounce back when we need to, and to be able to face through some of these challenging times. I know some of you have also developed some tech savviness, of course, because everything is so much more using technology to communicate and to stay connected. But I've also heard stories of students who have taken up coding in order to help tackle a problem in the lab because they're not able to actually tackle the problem directly. Thinking of ways to do so more efficiently when they do get back to the lab perhaps is an important skill that you or others have picked up. And then finally, data literacy. Of course, all of you have to work with data to some extent, but because, again, you're not able to be on the bench doing more and more with data and processing data away from the bench is probably a skill that you've gained during this time. And hopefully you've all become better organized and really taken up the ability to learn things in a different way. Every day I feel like I'm learning something new because there's so much information that's changing and coming at us constantly. So all of those skills are really vital ones for employers. And I'm sure there are others that you're probably thinking of right now. So taking those skills and thinking through sort of these are some of the things that I'm really strong in and figuring out how can I apply them or how can I share them. If you go into an interview, for example, and just say, oh yeah, I'm great at adhering to rules, but you don't give any evidence to back it up, employers aren't going to care about that. Likewise, putting on a resume communication skills in your skills section doesn't really mean much. That's kind of fluffy. Most people who are looking over your resume, your cover letter, who are talking to you in an interview, they want the facts. They want to know exactly why or how you obtain these skills. So it's showing them. So instead of saying, I'm a great communicator, tell them about the number of publications that you've written or a grant that you wrote and that got funded. So actually demonstrate through the specific things that you've done, the specific experiences you've had in order to demonstrate these skills. So self-assessing is an important piece of all of this, not just looking at the list of skills that you've just created, but kind of even going more than that. One of the things that I would really recommend you look at doing over the course of the rest of the semester, if you haven't already, is to complete a career interest assessment or an individualized development plan. There are many out there that are good. My favorite actually is put out by Science Careers, and this is the link for that. ACS, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention theirs as it's more chemistry focused. The Science Careers sort of gives you bigger, broader picture, I feel like, than the chemistry one does, but both of them are good. So go through them both if you've got the time. Also, go back and look at your experiences. What things have you done that might give clues to what you might want to do in the future? So maybe you TA'd or you tutored. How was that experience? Did you love it? Did you love getting up in front of students? If so, that could be a good indicator that maybe an academic career is something that you should consider. If you say, I don't like the TAing, but I liked supervising someone in my lab, that also could be an insight. So maybe you're in a role where you get to do some training or some teaching, even if it's not a formal one in the classroom. Writing. Have you loved writing your publications or gotten really excited over this time in the last couple of months of writing? Or maybe you had an opportunity to help on a grant that got funded. What does that look like? Writing can take a lot of different forms within a career. So maybe that's something you want to do full time. Maybe you want to become an editor for JAX or something. But maybe you're thinking, well, I want to do this more as a sideline, but I do enjoy it. So thinking through some of those experiences are really important. Safety. Since we've had JST, I know a lot more people have gotten interested in safety, either in how it impacts a regular job or even working for, like here, our university Division of Research Safety. We've had an alum go do that. So there's a lot of different places where you can apply your love of safety, your love of rules, and helping enforce those. Have you been involved in a committee, an organization? This one, WCC, or perhaps DCGSAC. Is there another organization that you've been involved in that maybe has nothing to do with chemistry, but where you feel like you've really built some solid teamwork or leadership skills? And how did you love that? If you love that, then maybe that's another indication that you want to be in that type of an environment. You want to be able to use some of those softer skills in addition to your hard technical lab skills and so forth. Have you had an opportunity to collaborate with a company through the research that you've been doing in your lab or a project you've been working on? Do you get really charged up every time there's a meeting with that group? Or is it something you just kind of do because you have to, because that's who's funding your project? So looking at those experiences, again, can give you clues. One final piece, in addition to your interests and your experiences, that you really should take a look at are your values. Unfortunately, I've seen too many students look at just the first two pieces and decide, oh, I'm going to do job X, without really considering what's truly important to you in a job. For some, that might mean a specific geographic location. That's your #1 priority. If so, that's fine, but just make sure that when you're considering career fields down the road, that you keep that #1 value in mind. So if what you think you want to do doesn't exist in this particular location, then you might want to look at some other alternatives. Likewise, perhaps a value is you really want to feel like you're making a difference for the betterment of the world. Or perhaps you want to really be making an impact in a health field particularly. So looking at those values of what's important to you and really being able to evaluate, again, both your interests and experiences, of course, what you're good at, but also look at things that are very important and sort of your true north, your true foundation. So my recommendation from here, once you've looked at your interests, your skills, your values, is to go back and really consider what types of jobs that might look like. And once you have some ideas, go out and do some informational interviews. Summer is typically a great time to do that when you don't have a number of different things going on. Now, I know many of you are trying to get restarted back up in your lab, so research is probably a little bit busier right now. So I'm definitely not advocating to do 5 of these a week. But start looking through a list and maybe figure out a few people that you could reach out to and then start the process. I've got a handout on informational interviewing that I'll share with Belinda to be able to pass along to the group, but definitely take a look at that. So informational interviews are important because they can really help validate your career choice. Now, of course, if you just talk to one person who hates their job, that's not necessarily a good reason for you to say, oh, I'm going to go do something else. But talking to a few different people can really help you understand that, yeah, this is a typical day that I think I would look forward to, or these are some things that sound of interest to me. The only way you can truly know whether or not you're going to like a job is to do it yourself. And so that's one of the reasons that we really recommend internships and so forth. But short of that, talking to people who are in those roles can also be very helpful. Narrow down a list of potential employers by talking to people who are in those organizations. So if you find out that perhaps a value for an organization doesn't necessarily align with you, that would be a good way to sort of eliminate that particular employer, or vice versa. Being able to consider types of employers as well as specific names of employers that you might be interested in. Of course, with informational interviews, you're also going to be making some contacts. You're going to be able to find out what's really going on in the real world right now. As everything is changing all the time, that's a good way to learn and to sort of build up a vocabulary about what's going on. And then hopefully in a year or two when you graduate, you'll have those contacts that you can reach out to, that you can say, hey, I'm now looking for a job. My recommendation, the best time to do informational interviews is actually earlier on in your graduate career, not in your last year, not necessarily even in your last 2 years. But maybe as a second year or as a third year, to definitely reach out and start building some of those relationships, and then stay in touch with them every 6 months or so. Send a quick note, or when you have a publication that gets done, let them know. And then that way, when it is time to start the job search process, you've got these rich contacts that you can just draw on and reach out to right away. Also, doing informational interviewing can help you obtain just general job leads, and maybe leads to more informational interviews. So you talk to somebody and you think, yeah, it's not quite the right fit, but that person may know somebody else, either a fellow alum or lab mate, or perhaps somebody else within their organization that would be a better fit for you. And then that can help lead to additional connections and contacts. Talking to people in an organization can also help you sort of develop a vocabulary. Just like in your lab, there are certain acronyms that you use or short abbreviations that maybe somebody outside of your lab or even outside of your field wouldn't have any idea about. Similarly, when you talk to people in an informational interview, the more you do that, the more you're going to hear keywords that you can say, hey, can you clarify that for me? What does that mean exactly? And then as you learn, you're going to build up a vocabulary. So that way, when you do go to a job interview down the road, you know how to talk the talk just like they do, and automatically they're going to see you as a better fit. Of course, part of an informational interview is for you to make a positive impression on the potential employer, even if it's a few years down the road. That way they can start thinking about you, and they might even reach out to you and say, hey, we've got this position open, or you might want to think about applying or doing such and such on your resume. So the more you can create a positive impression, the more you'll build potentials for down the road for you too. And finally, I think it just helps you build your confidence. If you're not quite sure what you want to do for a career, the more you start talking to people and sort of vocalizing what you think your plans and your goals are, the more confident and clear and concise you're going to sound when you do talk to people. So as you do go down the road again, and you're applying for jobs and interviewing and talking to employers at career fairs and so forth, you're going to sound a lot more confident because you've already had that practice. So some basics about informational interviewing. Number one is you want to think about who you can start reaching out to. And I would recommend reaching out to alumni, internal collaborators that you work with here, whether it's a lab mate or a professor, but even external collaborators, whether related to your science or not. These are some great places to get started because they're easy. You already have a little bit of a relationship established. So find some contacts and then start reaching out. If you don't have those collaborations and so forth listed in that first bullet point, think about people who used to be a part of your lab. Honestly, most people I've found love to talk about themselves. And so if you get them talking about themselves or their own research, they're going to be a great resource for you. Make sure you're asking the right questions that are open-ended that allow them to do that. But former lab mates, because you have that in common, even if you never cross paths with them, are probably going to be more willing and apt to talk with you. LinkedIn is another great resource. I'm not going to go into that fully here in this workshop, but you're welcome to follow up with me directly later on. And basically with LinkedIn, you can get general information based on their major, what they studied, and then you have this connection with potential alumni. Again, you might not know who they are at all, but as long as you have that connection of being an alumni, they're going to be more willing to take a chance to chat with you. My office can also provide assistance with this. So we have alums that have to fill out every year where they're going. And many of them will tell us, yeah, sure, I'm willing to talk with future students. So if you have a potential area that you're considering or a potential employer or even just a field, or maybe you're looking at something non-traditional, let me know, and I can often provide contact alumni that have said that they're willing to talk with current students. Hopefully your PI can also be a resource here, or your committee members. They might have some contacts that they know of through their fields, or just general colleagues. It might even be a postdoc who knew somebody in their grad work, or a fellow PhD who maybe had a friend as an undergrad that's now doing something different. So make sure you're reaching out to as many people as you can, letting them know what you're interested in. First step would be to email that potential contact. Have a few questions, let them know sort of why you're reaching out. Maybe even ask them 2 or 3 questions via the email that they can answer that way to sort of soften that initial relationship. And then ask for a Zoom meeting, ask for a phone meeting. Set something up through Skype so that you can actually spend 15 to 20 minutes. Don't monopolize their time, don't ask for all day or something like that, but a 15 to 20-minute interview is a great way to get started. And if the relationship goes well, then you might have more meetings or you might talk longer. But make sure, no matter, even if the conversation is great, try to keep that first initial conversation to the 15 or 20 minutes that you promised them you would. From here, once you've done a little research, you've talked to some people, from here, grow. Figure out, what can I do with this? How can I expand on this area? And there are some things that I would recommend you do even yet this summer. First of all, join a professional organization. If there's something related to your field or even to your narrow area, your discipline, get involved. Sit in on webinars, even though I know many of us are webinared to death, but get involved in that organization in whatever way you can. Read publications outside of your research area and in it, of course, but the more you can expand your knowledge, the more you can expand your growth area, the more you're going to be able to see a lot more possibilities that are out there for you. Engage with your committee members. I know many are going to be very open to this, whereas others may not be as open. Either way, see if you can connect with them. Professors love to talk about their research and what's exciting and going on in their lab. So start there if you feel uncomfortable starting a conversation. Read something they've written and talk about it. Reach out to them through email and ask a question about it. And then from there, the conversation can progress. Those people really are, in theory, supposed to be resources and advocates for you, be able to help you and challenge you and help you to grow. So take advantage, build some relationships, not just with your main PI, but also with the people who are on your committee. Build some skills. Think back to those soft skills we talked about at the beginning, or other technical skills that you might need. There are a lot of different places that you can go to build skills. You can take classes, either here at Illinois or online, through LinkedIn Learning, through Coursera. If there's some type of an actual skill that you feel like you need to build and you need to improve upon, don't be afraid to self-assess, to see that weakness area. If you've got time to grow, it's never too late. Take a class. Learn a new whatever, a new language, a new technical skill, learn to code, learn a soft skill, whatever the case might be. The more you can sort of continue to push yourself to grow, to learn, not just in your science, but in other areas as well, the better of a scientist you'll actually end up being. And then share that science. As I mentioned at the beginning, one of the most important pieces of a scientist's sort of soft skill repertoire is being able to share their science. If you can't talk about it, if you can't communicate about it, it doesn't really go anywhere. So figure out ways to do that. Maybe right now during the pandemic, and as the pandemic is sort of starting to open up a little bit, can you create a website or a podcast or a blog? I would say probably 2 to 3 years, podcasts were starting to decline in popularity, but we've really seen a significant increase during this pandemic time. So can you start talking to people? Can you engage people with your science in a way that makes them want to learn more and interest them? And you might, who knows, find something out that can help you in your own science in the process. But the more you can communicate, the more you can put yourself out there, the better it will be for you, but also that your science will get forwarded. Of course, you're constantly writing publications, but write a paper, maybe even write something more creative. Write for the Daily Illini, or do a science column. Maybe even do a freelance article for CNEN about something related to the pandemic and how your research fits in with that, or something that you've learned. There are a lot of places where you can still write scholarly type writings without having to necessarily be just about your research. So think about ways that you can increase that skill. And finally, as I mentioned, be sure to visit SCS Career Services. There are a lot of different things that we can do for you and help you with. We are still virtual right now, but we're happy to set up appointments with you through your Handshake at Illinois account, and we can do a lot of different things via Zoom. Some of those things would include clarifying your career direction. So you can come talk with us and say, I'm kind of thinking about this, but I'm not really sure. What do you think? How do I move forward, and so forth? We also offer a number of workshops, events this year, because most of our virtual recruiting is starting, most of our on-campus recruiting is starting virtually. Our information sessions are going to be open to all students. So we absolutely encourage you, sit in on some of those, learn about a couple of the companies, even if you're in your first year or your second year, certainly check those out. It helps you to start to think about, yes, this is an organization I might be interested down the road, or no, this isn't the path I really want to go. We also will offer a number of just general workshops on professional development, things like this, but also other events that will certainly be posted in your Handshake at Illinois account. This right now is a great time to work on polishing your resume. If you are even a first-year student, I know a number of first years came to talk with us earlier in the summer because they were applying for fellowships and so forth through the department. Of course, let us help you with your resume. It's never too early to do that. Now, certainly if you're within a year to 2 years of graduation, you absolutely want to be having us look at not just your resume, but also your cover letter, a research summary, because you will need those things as you're looking at employment. If you're looking at an academic track, you may also need a teaching philosophy, so we're happy to look at those for you as well. Practice your interviewing skills. As I mentioned earlier, most interviews right now are being held virtually, so we will be doing virtual interview practice with you as well. Sometimes there's things you don't think about when you're doing a virtual interview or a phone interview that would maybe be the same if you're in a in-person situation. So we can talk about all of those different places with you in interviews and what it's like. Definitely, we can also help you look at your potential contact list or potential employer list to start building that. And then finally, I would also encourage you to check out your Handshake at Illinois account, not only for the events that I've just talked about, but also just to see what jobs are out there. And this is something you can do, again, at any point in your graduate career. Start exploring what you might want to do by seeing what jobs are actually out there. Do a little searching through and say, oh, I like this, but I don't think I have these 3 things yet. How can I add those in while I'm a grad student? So if you wait until your final year to do that, it's a little bit harder to build those skills. Whereas if you're a second or third year, you've still got time to add those skills to your repertoire. So contact our office. We are more than happy to talk with you. Here's our contact information, and through Handshake at Illinois account, you can absolutely schedule an appointment with either me or Jennifer, who's on the call today, at any point, and we're happy to meet with you according to your calendar. So I'm glad to entertain any questions right now that you might have. Otherwise, make sure that you don't let the summer and this time of COVID go to waste. There are definitely things you can be doing even right now that will help you feel a little bit more in control of where you end up in the future.